right. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here, definitely, and thank you, Lauren, for this wonderful introduction. Sounds like a beautiful eulogy. And so that's yes, I have a pretty bizarre background. I was born and raised in a place called Tatarstan, and on Volga River. That was the capital of Golden Hordes. That was the empire of Genghis Khan. And they ruled Russia from over there, the Tatars and Mongols. When I was 15, I defected my first time to Moscow and lived in Moscow, working for Soviet government, which definitely sounds like an oxymoron, but I was one of economic advisors to Gorbachev's government at my last years in Moscow. I wasn't the advisor. I wouldn't take the blame for what happened with 11 time zones. But that's exactly the result that nobody listened to my advice. Then I defected to the United States unexpectedly for myself in 1989 and found myself working for the second largest bureaucracy of this planet, for the federal government in Washington, D.C. I worked in the congressional think tank, which I think, like most congressional think tanks, I didn't think much. And so I decided to do something positive with my life at last, and applied for a job and got a job in 1991 at Carthage College. At first I thought I will go to Carthage maybe for half a year and look for a real job. But I liked Carthage very much, and so it's my longest employment in my life is at Carthage College, which is a beautiful and wonderful place to be, and one of the most freest places to be, because I was, for example, I was doing some part-time work in Washington, D.C. at George Mason University, which is a free-thinking place, but even George Mason is far away from Carthage in academic freedom, I would say, in academic freedom. So I was asked today to talk about Kremlin. What is Kremlin? Well, Kremlin is a big building, and usually populated by pretty bad people. So that's the kind of a short answer what this lecture is all about. I'm doing, since 1990, I'm doing seminars, mostly in Washington, D.C. And last week we had an assessment day, so I took a liberty to fly to Hawaii to do a seminar for the United States Navy there instead of assessment. I think that the best assessment is our students, and they come and assess us. If they wouldn't, then no matter how much we would assess ourselves, nothing would happen. And I think that the Carthage, the real treasure of Carthage students. It's just wonderful students. Very interesting to see how they, since '91, how they changed, how they became computer savvy, how they, all with devices and whatnot. And every year, because I became a travel freak, every year I'm taking students in January, usually, because January is bad in Wisconsin, even for a Russian. I would say it's very nice to do some mini defections because this promised global warming didn't materialize, and we have this global freezing nonstop, and it's nice to be somewhere out of Wisconsin. And usually, recently I developed a habit of going to Africa, to South Africa. South Africa is exactly the opposite of Russia or Wisconsin. However, my first boss, Mr. Yeltsin, I had a dubious pleasure of working with him. And Mr. Yeltsin, he once said in my presence, he said, Russia is a white Africa. And his aide, he said, you can't say that. Say something else. He said, it's cold Africa. So that's was politically correct Mr. Yeltsin, who otherwise would just shout obscenities on people. So this is in our last volume of Carthaginian. There is a wonderful story about our travels to South Africa. And what I'm saying is because I really want you to join us in these trips, because we had time at a certain point when when we had a lot of adults in these trips, and that were alumni, that were also donors, friends of Carthage, people from the community, trustees of the college. John joined us for twice for these trips, and it's very good for everybody. It's very good for you because you will mingle with students, you will see what Carthage looks like today, and maybe you will find some common professors to laugh about or to make new friends. Besides, it's very good for students also, very good for students, because most of our alumni are very accomplished people, so they see that they are investing very well into their education, and some of our alumni that we meet overseas, they're making a lot of difference. I have a wonderful alumni, a wonderful student, Alen Kuzilwa. Right now, he is the High Commissioner of Republic of Tanzania in London, United Kingdom. And when we visited Tanzania, he was Chief Economic Advisor to Tanzanian President. He spent a lot of time with us, and he delivered a very touching speech about how much he owes everything that he achieved to Carthage College. So that's last trip. We went to Bloemfontein, Republic of South Africa, and our wonderful another alumna, Eliska Buis, she worked in the communication office with Jim Glaube, vice president at that time of the college, and so she met us, and we are all the time surrounded with friends. So if you are interested, then ask me for my business card, and I will give you one, or find me at the Carthage directory and email me that you would like to join us, because that's very good both for you, for students, for me, because definitely with more responsible adults on the trip, it's much easier. So I would say that welcome to, and we have wonderful friends in all these countries. One of them, Herman Mashaba, he's a famous South African industrialist. He wrote a wonderful book, Black Like You. And this book, we use it for our class. He visited Carthage in beginning of February, delivered public lectures and visited classes. And because he was stuck in Boston for one night, so he couldn't come at the time that he promised, so he's coming back in September. He very generously returned back his honorarium back to Carthage to fund. We have here also, I want to acknowledge that Jason Fernandez, he is president of Economics Engaged, that's Economics Club of Carthage, and so Mr. Mashaba generously donated his honorarium to our economics club. And he is a fascinating person, definitely. He was born in a family of 10 and with no electricity, with no indoor plumbing, with no nothing, and now he is one of the richest people in the world, not only in South Africa. In Forbes magazine, you can look at him. So returning back from South Africa to Russia, what can we say? Well, Russia is very difficult. Well, Churchill, I think, he was the great specialist in Russia. He used to say that Russia is an enigma wrapped in mystery, and Russia is I like that quip, that Russia is the only country in the world with unpredictable past. So it's very difficult, very difficult to predict the future for them. So future in Russia is definitely in clouds. Well, the problem definitely with Russia is that it is a problem. My favorite philosopher, Russian philosopher of the 19th century is Peter Chadaev, a great Russian philosopher. He wrote his memoirs with a very cheerful title, Notes from the Madhouse. And the first sentence is that I am drinking my vodka and looking at the fireplace, and I am wondering why the Lord, in his wisdom, created such an absurdity as Mother Russia. And it occurred to me to teach mankind some awful lesson all the time. So I'm thinking that what if we will see what kind of lesson we can learn from them and what Russia is doing today. And it's definitely, you can teach a course for a couple of semesters on this topic. we don't have so much time, so what if I will make an introductory kind of statement for maybe half an hour, and then we will see if you will not be too bored. Then we can have questions and answers and comments and discussion, because and then we can discuss the issues that are of interest for you. Well, Russia is really the biggest thing ever happened to the world. It was when it was Soviet Union. Before that glorious night of the 24th of December of 1991, when Soviet Union collapsed. How did it collapse? Because Russia declared its independence from the Soviet Union. Not many people know about that. That it was not Gorbachev, it was not nobody else destroyed Soviet Union, that evil empire, but it was Russian President Yeltsin who declared his independence, the independence of Russia from Soviet Union. Soviet Union could not exist. It would be the same, say, if continental US would secede from United States and only Hawaii and Puerto Rico would like still to stay in the Union. So the bulk of Soviet Union, the 75% of territory and 50% of population left the USSR. So USSR was no more already on a Christmas day of 1991. It's very interesting for me as an economist to see how the Soviet Union broke into 15 pieces, into 15 so-called Union republics. And they all went from the socialist slavery to freedom in different ways, And it's very interesting for me to see and to compare which whiskey works and which does not. Because some of them, the starting point was more or less the same. The Soviet economy was in pretty bad shape in 1991. Gross domestic product was assessed as $2,000 per person per year. So in the United States today it's $49,000 per person per year. So it was kind of like each one of you would be on average 25 times richer than Russians in 1991. Russians and others. Today, if you will look, Russia has about $10,000 per person per year, so increased 5 times. Estonia, a Baltic state, have $36,000 per year right now, so 18 times. Can you imagine, in the lifetime of one generation, your incomes skyrocketed 18 times. 18 times. Lithuania, $26,000. Latvia, $24,000. Belarus, $3,000. Moldova, $2,500. And these were countries which were doing even better, I would say, than Russia or Ukraine in that period of time in the Soviet states. Moldova, former Soviet Republic, right now is the poorest place in Europe. So these are the kind of Russia right now is not 11 time zones as the Soviet Union was. It's 9 time zones. Still, Russia today is bigger than United States and Canada combined, territory-wise. Population of Russia is 140 million. When I defected from Soviet Union in 1989, the population of Russia was 156 million. So Russia's population is changing all the time. Russians themselves, the nation whose numbers are diminishing and diminishing, the fertility rate, they have 1.2 children per one woman of fertile age. 1.2, that means it's short of even simple reproduction, which is 2.1. Just to have the same numbers, you need 2.1. 2 to replace 2 parents, 0.1, mortality or whatever, God forbid. Then they have 1.2, so they are declining. However, Muslims in Russia, they have fertility rate 4.6. So it's a thriving community and it's expanding community. I came from the Muslim part of Soviet, I'm not Muslim myself, but came from Muslim part of Soviet Union. And amazingly enough, they have a revival of their cultural, national, and religious identity. Because when I went to school with my Tatar friends, they would proudly tell me that they don't speak Tatar language. That is the language of backward and stupid peasants. Today, the same very people, whom I know, I mean, the same very people, they all are waiting to be takers. They all go to the mosque, they pray 5 times a day, they do everything, and they're trying to speak Tatar only. So these are the changes. And the Tsars in Kazan, that's where I'm from again, they had about 400 mosques. And the socialists, they reduced it to 1. Everything else was either blown up or used as a warehouse. And this one, I was all the time trying, I was young and curious, to get in and to see. And they would never let me in because there was this young communist league hoodlums would prevent anyone who is under 60 to get into the mosque, because religion in the Soviet Union was considered to be an opium of the people. That's what famous Marx dictum was, that religion is the opium of the people. And religious people were treated in a very harsh way. I have a very interesting, also through Carthage, at first I got a little grant to work on something called Volkogonov archives. That's a fascinating person. His name is Dmitry Volkogonov. Dmitry Volkogonov, he was the chief military propaganda person in the Soviet Union. He was just a professional liar, and anytime I would see him on TV, I would switch the whole, this stupid box right away. Because I just couldn't stand his lies and lies and lies. They were so primitive lies. And I never would imagine. He was commander of the Soviet Institute for Military History and member of the Central Committee of the party. And so only after collapse of Soviet Union, it turned out that this very person in 1980 bought a first Xerox machine for his institute. And he was making highly illegal copies of everything going through his table. He would be shot without any trial, without anything, if somebody would find it out. And he accumulated all these copies in 46 huge boxes in his dacha. Dacha in Russian, this is summer residence outside usually of Moscow. And he, in the basement, he had all this treasure. And when Soviet Union collapsed, he became national security advisor to Mr. Yeltsin, to first president of Russia. And he approached the US ambassador in one of the receptions in Kremlin that he wants to smuggle all this thing to United States because he is afraid that KGB will recover, will take over again, and then they will put a lid on all of these treasures that he accumulated during his propaganda time. And US ambassador, he offered him help. He said, I will connect you to the agency, to the CIA. And Mr. Volkogonov, he said, no agency, please, a Library of Congress, and if the agency would like to read it, then they can get a reader's card and read it. And that was, I think, a very good decision because knowing this intelligence culture in Washington, I think the agency would classify it again and nobody would learn anything. But speaking about why this was kind of a background for religion, because when I go to Washington, I have free time, I'm going to the Library of Congress, to the manuscripts department, and work on this archives. Looks like I'm the only one who does. This is a treasure. It's 10,000 PhDs could be written on these materials. And they're handwritten, mostly handwritten memos by Lenin, by Stalin, by Khrushchev, by Gorbachev, And for example, speaking about religion, there's a commissar from southern Russia is writing to Lenin. He said, dear Comrade Lenin, you sent us a memo that we should fight religion, but you didn't explain how. And Lenin is writing him back, dear Comrade Imbecile, murder religious people, that's how. Lenin, postscript. And murder them the way that everybody would tremble with fear 150 miles around. In 1929, not many people in the United States know about that Stalin decriminalized murder of religious people. They decided, why should we spend state ammunition to kill them? Everybody could kill a priest, a nun, or a monk, and people began to do that. And that, I think that's the most awful consequence of Soviet socialism, is the destruction of human spirit, the destruction of decency, destruction of human character, because it was so attractive to go and kill the priest and rape his wife and take his belongings, and that was happening all the time. 900,000 clerics were murdered before 1942. In 1942, Stalin decriminalized religion. He decided that they can open churches again. For what reason? Because during 1941, 1942, there was horrible years of war for the Soviet Union, and not many people also in the West know that over 2 million Soviet soldiers defected to Germans. It was mass defections. The whole armies, the 14th Army of General Vlasov, which was defending Leningrad, General Vlasov made a 20-minute speech. Can you imagine? 20-minute speech saying that we have Antichrist in Kremlin, who is destroying everything. And the people turned around and went to. It was an awful choice, definitely. Can you imagine? You really between Scylla and Charybdis, you're trading Stalin for Hitler. And that's the awful choice that people faced. Yeah, awful choice. But Stalin thought that he's losing the war because of that, and that's why religion was legalized again. Not many people, because we're kind of short of time, I can just kind of make a frame of what I think would be interesting to discuss. Not many people in the West, at least none of my students, know about the scope of mass murders and repression in the Soviet Union. In 1989, when I was still there, Mr. Gorbachev, you remember, he came up with the idea of perestroika. Perestroika, that was his major policy. Perestroika, that means restructuring. But collateral to that policy was policy of glasnost. Glasnost means openness. It was nothing to do with freedom of speech, just a little bit more transparency in government. And but part of this policy of glasnost was to put ministers of his cabinet on the spot, on TV, and people would call in. That was a revolutionary change because before that, everything you could watch on TV in Soviet Union would be pre-taped months and months before, and then approved by several committees and commissions. And so then it was amazing that the chairman of the KGB, Viktor Khrushchev, was put on the spot, and one of the callers, I think it was staged by Gorbachev himself, one of the callers, he said, Comrade Khrushchev, we have, I calculated that your institution murdered 43 million people. Is it the true number or you're just, or not? And Mr. Khrushchev said, well, how would I know? I mean, then give me a week, and in a week I will either reject this number or would validate it. So next week, the whole country was glued to TV screens. It was less people on the streets than when there is a hockey or soccer match. So everybody was glued to find out how many millions of skeletons you have in your cupboard. And Mr. Khrushchev, he said, well, comrades, the number is about right, but it's preposterous to insist that all these people were murdered. Most of them died of natural causes. And the moderator was a young lady with guts, and she said, well, if you don't feed people, they die of natural causes. If you don't clothe them in Siberia, they die of natural causes. And like that. Well, he couldn't say anything. He said something like, oh, people die everywhere, or whatever. Then today, the Rudy Rummel, the most famous demographer in the United States from University of Hawaii, he published many books. One of them is a classic book called Death by Government, How Many People Are Killed by Their Own Governments. And Rudy Rummel calculated that in Soviet Union alone, it was 61 million people. The Solzhenitsyn Foundation believes it's 59 to 60 million people. I would say, for me, all of these numbers are just pure abstraction, because these numbers are just so incomprehensible for human being. Even Stalin, he used to say that death of one is a tragedy, death of a million just statistic. That's his famous quip. He used to say, all problems have a man lurking behind. No man, no problem. And that's the kind of Stalin used to say, it's also in this Volkogonov archives, because amazingly enough, it was put on the lead, and some of his quips are pretty cynical, speaking about, for example, elections. In 1929, they decided to do elections, first time after the revolution. And he was addressing Politburo about elections. And other people would say, well, how would we control who votes how? And Stalin, he said, shut up. It's a free country. I don't care who votes how. People are free to choose whatever they like. The only thing, comrades, he said, I worried about, who counts these votes? So that's exactly, I think, Mr. Putin, being a good disciple of Stalin, that's exactly what he repeated in Crimea in March of last year. So this was the kind of the background. Why so many people are killed? Why 86 million Chinese people perished under Mao Zedong? Why so many Cubans, North Koreans, Yugoslavs, whomever else were murdered by their own governments? The reason is very simple. It's kind of in microeconomics. There are no incentives to do anything under socialism. No incentives. If I would tell you that no matter what you do, you will live the same, you will get the same, and then people realize that, then why to bother? Why to bother? Moreover, if you work harder than others, then others hate you. So it was the whole society, the whole kind of economy was based on shirking and stealing of working time. So how to make people work? The only way is to introduce other type of incentives. Fear of being killed, fear of being shot, fear of being thrown out of Moscow, fear of getting out of your apartment. So this was the normal incentives were replaced by fear. Why Soviet Union collapsed? Because my boss, Mr. Gorbachev, he removed fear out of the system, which was glued together only by fear. Only by fear. Because Mr. Gorbachev, we were amused and surprised, because when he was elected as a General Secretary of the Communist Party of Soviet Union, on the glorious day of 23rd of March 1985, well, elected by 11 people. That's the Politburo members, yeah. So when he was elected, he immediately began to talk about socialism with a human face. And no one of us would understand that. What does it mean with human face? He made several speeches saying that Stalin perverted this wonderful image of socialism, made socialism unattractive because of these atrocities, because of these crimes. And so we should return back to Leninist vision. Because I knew history enough to know that Lenin was also a mass murderer. So I was kind of thinking, what does it really mean? And amazingly enough, my immediate boss was first deputy prime minister of Soviet Union, Leonid Abalkin. All the time he would come very frustrated after our meetings with Mr. Gorbachev and would say, nobody knows what's behind this birthmark. And really so, yeah, because we were thinking whether he's doing that kind of randomly or there is any thought behind that or what does it all mean. But speaking about human face socialism, he removed fear out of the system, and on the good side, everybody stopped working. There was a joke popular in Moscow at that time that the CIA didn't know what's happening in Soviet Union, what is this perestroika is, and they picked up the best agent, kind of like another James Bond, sent him to Moscow, and this agent with a little notebook, he walks from one store to another. He goes to the butcher shop and writes no meat. He goes to the bakery and writes no bread. He goes to the shoe store, no shoes. And there is a KGB person who is monitoring him. And he looks over his shoulder and he said, 10 years ago, you would be shot for doing that. He writes, there are no bullets. And that's exactly what many people realize, that if there are no bullets, then why to work at all? At that time, it was before when I worked for his administration. I worked at that time as a chief consultant of Soviet Bank for Foreign Trade, which was, I think, the best paid vacation I ever had. And I had a secretary, Lena, a very nice young woman, evening student of Moscow State University. And I saw her picking up paper clips, putting into her purse. And I said, Lena, why do you steal state property in such strange form, paper clips? And she went ballistic on me. She said, Yuri, what else can I take from this, she used a very bad word, office? Well, show me, I'll take that. Nothing, paper clips, Lenin's picture, nothing. And I was walking back home thinking, if the youngest and the brightest are going to work only to steal something there, that's the end of this economy and this experiment. So I kind of came to this idea that Soviet Union will be no more, maybe 6 years before CIA read about the collapse of Soviet Union from Washington Post. So that's the, so again, the simple thing that the same thing happened in Iraq. When Saddam Hussein was taken out, then the whole thing imploded because it was based on fear. And then everybody realized that they have all these ancient grudges against themselves, Shia against Sunni, everybody against Kurds, and on and on and on like that. The same thing happened in the USSR. I would say, because people usually are interested in that, having said that, we were kind of economic advisors to Mr. Gorbachev. It was our official job. When we would have meetings with him, we would do all the writing and he will do all the talking. So that means the advice would go other way around. And Mr. Gorbachev was, however, he was a very refreshing change from Mr. Yeltsin, who was kind of Ivan the Terrible of Kremlin. And Mr. Gorbachev, he was pleasant and polite person. And once I even heard a funny thing from him. We had his best confidant and friend was Abel Aganbegyan, an Armenian economist who's very big, very big. We called him the biggest economist in the world. He was maybe 400 pounds. And Mr. Aganbegyan, we were sitting next to him, and Aganbegyan said, you know what, I think that we should abandon Stalinist model and build a Swedish model of socialism. And Gorbachev's over there, first time was kind of pleasantly surprised, it has some sense of humor. He said, Abel, well, you would get all the Swedes. and I said, well, the Russians can do it. He said, well, try it, yeah. So it was pretty, sometimes they would have kind of the same thing with Mr. Yeltsin. In the year 1999, he was passing his presidency to young KGB officer, Mr. Putin. And Yeltsin was on TV, and it was 5 minutes before 12 on the Millennium night. And he introduced Mr. Putin, and he said, dear Russians, it looks like he already celebrated. Mr. Yeltsin was known that he loved certain beverages very much. And he looks like he already indulged in this. And he said, dear Russians, I really tried to do everything I could to make Russia a better place to live. And then was a tear going on. He did like that. He said, but it turned out as usual. And that was, I never would expect him to do that. That was very, very interesting and very telling. And then what happened, just jumping ahead, that the first relatively free elections in 2000, in March of 2000, Russian people, I think, made a very poor judgment electing Vladimir Putin as their president. Why it's such a poor judgment? Because Mr. Putin is unreformed KGB officer. He is proud KGB officer. He was recently interviewed and asked that you're an ex-KGB. He said there's no such thing as ex-KGB. You're KGB forever. And he is very proud to be Chekist. That's the kind of how they call this secret police people. Can you imagine if whether KGB murdered 43 or 61 million people or any other amount like this, and then people would vote to have a proud member of this kind of institution to lead them where? Then he got 70% of the vote. Can you imagine if the officer of SS or Gestapo in Germany would be elected even a dog catcher in a remote village? That would be a national tragedy, soul searching, whatever else. Yes, and here we have a proud member of the KGB who is toasting to Stalin, who is all the time repeating on and on and on that the dissolution of Soviet Union is the greatest tragedy in human history. That the prison went down, that means that's the greatest tragedy in human history. So this is the kind of, I mentioned that Russia is still the biggest place on earth. It's 1/6 of the world's surface. Russia is 1/6 of the world's surface. Because I published an article in Russian at that time under the self-descriptive title, Meat Voted for a Meat Grinder. So because of that, I explore in my travels 5/6 of the world's surface rather than that 1/6. Because Mr. Putin is also very well known that life expectancy around people that he doesn't like drops like a rock. It's amazing that how many people disappeared, how many convenient deaths happened, how President of Poland, Lech Kaczynski, fell from Russian sky, and a lot of other things. Yes, so these are the, in most cases, it's kind of difficult to prove that it was him. Just 3 weeks ago, Boris Nemtsov, whom I happen to know, he was deputy prime minister of Russia. He was shot just 100 feet from Kremlin, the best journalists, the best writers, and I knew one of them, Genrikh Borovik, his name was, a very good journalist and writer, and he was writing detective novels. And he became close friend of Mr. Putin when Putin was chairman of the KGB or FSB. That's just different acronyms. And when Putin was elected president, he wrote an article about Putin, knowing Putin closely, that the title of the article. And he quoted Putin that he asked him what Putin said, in my toolbox, I have 3 best tools. Number 1 is blackmail. Number 2 is vodka, but in general terms. Can be little boys, can be heroin, can be whatever their heart desire. And number 3 is threat to kill a person or family if the person doesn't work. So these are 3. And I wouldn't mention it because, well, the journalists are writing everything. But amazingly enough, Mr. Borovik was the first to fall from the sky. He went on hunting expedition and his helicopter with all his friends fell from the sky in eastern Siberia, and that was the end of him. So now I kind of more serious in assessing him as a serious writer. A lot of others, General Lebed and other very famous Russians disappeared or was done something with. Why Mr. Putin and who is him? Mr. Putin was born on the 7th of October, 1952. Mr. Putin he's relatively young, he is very fit. So my Cuban friends are saying that you have less hope than us. We have octogenarians, and so we are maybe counting days, and you should count tens of years. And unfortunately, we should, because Mr. Putin will never quit. In political science, I think we have this phenomenon that people who committed a lot of crimes and misdemeanors cannot quit. Kim family cannot quit in North Korea. They will be torn into pieces. The murderous Castro brothers cannot quit. Putin cannot quit. Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe cannot quit. So these people are doomed to stay there if they like themselves, because otherwise they know what will happen to them and in many cases to their families. So Mr. Putin is a permanent fixture, and I think that all of his policies are devoted to his survivability strategy. So that's the most. What's his background? His father was a KGB officer. His grandfather, however, had a very interesting job. He was the personal cook of Stalin. It was an extremely important job. It was way more important than being a minister of food or whatever else. So Mr. Putin was raised under this cult of personality of Stalin. He is known to have Stalin's picture in his office. So Mr. Putin is trying, right now what he is trying to do, he is trying to create a mobilization regime, because Russian economy is not doing well because of invention of fracking, and not many people also know. I was surprised. I did a seminar this week in Washington, D.C. I had a wonderful meeting with Prime Minister of Estonia, and he was an extremely bright individual from New Jersey. Tom Ilves, yes, from New Jersey. Computer geek in New Jersey, graduated from Rutgers University, went to Estonia, decided to start a business there, went to a pub, people get him drunk and talked him into running for office. and so he made a very interesting talk about Estonia, Russia, and everything. But speaking about that Mr. Putin had this cult of Stalin in his family. So he applied, when he was in 9th grade, he applied to work in KGB. He was declined. KGB advised him to get an education first. That's probably the first and last humane kind of advice they ever gave. And then when he went to the law department of Leningrad State University, well, Soviet law is even more oxymoron than Soviet economics. And so he graduated from there, and he was admitted to KGB, and he worked at first in the external reconnaissance unit. What does mean? That means he was sitting in the park with a newspaper, would make a hole and look who is going where, under any kind of weather and whatever. And so he didn't like this job, and he went to the academy of KGB. And that sounds like even more oxymoron, but he graduated from Academy of KGB. And amazingly enough, it's interesting, the South African connection. In South Africa, I was part of a team. We were making a film which will be on the screens in June, about Soviet infiltration into Africa, about how Soviets wanted to take over African countries, and especially in South Africa, there's a Simonstown. That's a huge formerly Royal Navy base on the Cape of Good Hope. So that's what they wanted to control everything from there and whatnot. And amazingly enough, Jacob Zuma, current president of South Africa, he went to KGB Academy together with Mr. Putin. It's interesting how small is the world. But Mr. Putin, he graduated from that, and he was stationed in Dresden, Germany, as a liaison officer between KGB and Stasi, that's secret German police, which was killing mostly Lutheran pastors and defectors and whatnot. And he was in KGB known under the loving kind of nickname Comrade Stasi. In 1990, he was pulled out of Germany because Germany already unified. And he became chief international affairs advisor to mayor of Leningrad, Anatoly Sobchak. Anatoly Sobchak was a true kind of Democrat with a lowercase d, and he was a dissident under Soviets. He was the one who renamed Leningrad back to St. Petersburg. And then Mr. Sobchak died under unknown circumstances in 1994, and Mr. Putin became chief of staff for President Yeltsin, who never met him before. And when Yeltsin was asked why Putin, he said he was highly recommended by people whom I cannot say no. So that's the kind of the story of Mr. Putin. Why it matters for us? Because it does matter right now. Because Mr. Putin desperately needs enemies. Some people in the United States, both on the left and on the right, would say that, no, it's a reaction to what we do. No, it is not. No matter what we do, we in his vision, are enemies, because he otherwise he doesn't have any legitimacy for his regime if he doesn't have huge external threat, whether it's real, imaginary, or fabricated. In this case, it's imaginary and fabricated because our administration is doing everything to please him, and he just is very adversarial. Because I'm teaching a class on Russia and I'm doing the seminars for the military and intelligence community, my occupational hazard is to watch Russian TV and read Russian newspapers almost every day. And I would say it's blood chilling what you see. Leader of opposition, Mr. Zhirinovsky, Vladimir Zhirinovsky, he is the best buddy of Putin, sure enough. Opposition is all fake. He recently demanded that Russia should be restored in the borders of 1850. Putin is saying Soviet Union should be restored. Then Zhirinovsky is saying in borders of 1850. What does it mean 1850? That means Poland, Finland, and Alaska. That's what 1850 is, yes. So this is the, Mr. Putin does not endorse it, definitely, because I think that he prompted him to say that, just to be nice guy on this kind of background. That's what Russian tsars and everybody else were doing all the time. Even Gorbachev would try to surround himself with a kind of very people of no talent or significance, because then he shines, and that's what Mr. Putin is doing. So this is one kind of bad thing, I believe. Then on his watch, military expenditures of Soviet Union rose 11 times. Expenditure of FSB about 15 times. I'm not sure whether his numbers are right or not. That's produced by the Royal Institute for Strategic Studies in London. And that's usually Russian statistics or Russian numbers are pretty well. I can finish with that when I defected, I was debriefed by all intelligence services of the West, because not many people knew at that time, 1989, summer of 1989, what's happening in Russia. So, because that guy didn't tell them much, who was in this joke. And so intelligence service, many of them were not very intelligent. But I would come with I tried to recalculate Russian numbers, and my idea was that Russian economy is between 6 and 7% of the US economy. And CIA believed it's 65%. So when I already came to the United States, I was invited by Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney at that time was Secretary of Defense. And I was, and I had a meeting with Mr. Cheney, and he looked at this folder, probably was my materials of my debriefing, and he said, well, see, I think it's 65%, you think it's between 6 and 7, and the British think it's 45, 50. I would presume, he said, that truth is in between. I said, of course, Mr. Secretary, you're right, it's between 6 and 7%. And what was amazing, that Cheney smiled ear to ear, and he said, sweet. I would expect anything else, but not that. And so that was pretty, I am probably, Lynn Cheney, his wife, and myself are probably the only people who don't hate him these days, but I still wouldn't go hunting with him. So on this tragic note, therefore, I know that speaking about Russia is not very cheerful experience to listen. So on this note, maybe we will discuss what you would like to, or if you have questions or comments, you'll be very much welcome.
How far will Putin go in the future? If the economy gets worse in Russia and internationally, will he push the borders? Or how far will he go?
Well, Mr. Putin, I think he strongly believes that the West is very weak, is very divided, and it will never do anything to him. And we don't. Putin already attacked our very good ally, Georgia. If you remember, in August 2008, Putin invaded Georgia. At that time, 4,000 elite troops of Georgia, 4,000 paratroopers, Georgian paratroopers, were fighting in Iraq, just next to us and the Brits and whatnot. So when Georgian army was fighting in Iraq, Putin attacked Georgia. We didn't do anything. Then today we have sanctions against Putin. That's the only thing we have because of his invasion of Ukraine. The sanctions, I would say, this is a joke, which is the sanctions. What the sanctions are boils down to, that people around Mr. Putin cannot come to the United States. They would be declined visas. They cannot open bank accounts in the United States. They cannot buy property in the United States, real estate or otherwise. And I would say, well, this is cruel, but it is not. Because when Putin was elected first time as the president of Russia, his decree, presidential decree number 3, was exactly this. That if you are a member of his government, you cannot have bank accounts overseas. You cannot buy anything overseas. You cannot go there without his permission, and on like that. Putin is a control freak. Control freak. I mean, can you imagine if I am a member of his government, I have a hefty bank account somewhere in Bahamas, then that's kind of an invitation to defect. And so now we decided to help Mr. Putin to enforce his decree, presidential decree number 3, with the full force of FBI and IRS and whomever else. So this is then President of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko. He spoke to the joint session of Congress, and everybody was standing and clapping and whatnot. And that's the claps, that's what he got. Because Ukrainians are begging for arms. Because Mr. Poroshenko is making all the time the point that we are fighting your war, that we are your proxies. And you're supplying us with night vision goggles and blankets. So when there is attack of Russians on their positions, they can throw back night vision goggles and cover themselves with blankets. So this is the kind of the issue I see, that it should be at a certain point kind of resolved.
Isn't it true that there is a divide in Ukraine between the East Russian dominated?
Of course.
Native
Very good question. Yes. Well, in Soviet Union was really an evil empire. Evil in the sense that I strongly believe that if there will be no Soviet Union, wouldn't have 9/11. Because Soviet Union invaded and destabilized Afghanistan, completely destroyed it, and that's what happened after. In the dreadful winter of 1932-1933, just returning back to Ukrainian history, Stalin organized something called Holodomor in Ukrainian. That means starvation. That was a government-organized starvation during which about 9 million Ukrainians were starved to death in the period of this winter of 1932-1933. Red Army came and confiscated all food. Those who didn't die, 6 million didn't die, they were deported to Siberia, and they perished over there. If you are interested in that, you can. There's a wonderful video called Soviet Story. I would advise anyone who is interested in history to watch this video. We have it at the library of Carthage College, and also you can get a DVD on the World Wide Web, or you can even watch it for free, I think, on the World Wide Web. This is a story of this Holodomor.
Were the kulaks, were they
Ukrainian?
Yeah.
That's right, because at that time was collectivization of agriculture. And Ukrainian farmers, they were the richest ones in the Soviet Union, because Ukraine is known for its black dirt. Black dirt of Ukraine is the most fertile soil in Europe. That's why Ukraine, before the First World War, was considered to be a breadbasket for Europe. And so then these people were fiercely opposing this collectivization. What do you mean collectivization? Collectivization means that the government will turn you into a slave on your own land, and you will work for free for them, and when you would be sick or whatever, then they would send you to die into Gulag. Because I think what socialism, true socialism is the system of public slavery. If you will look at private slavery, as disgusting as private slavery is, it does make sense to kill slaves, because then you would destroy your own wealth. In public slavery, you have people who are not owned by anyone, who are completely expendable, who can become, from an asset, they can become a liability when they age, when they get sick, whatever, and then they just dispose of them. And so that was exactly what the Ukrainian peasants felt, that they don't want to. And Stalin at that time, he wrote this famous memo that we are losing Ukraine. We should do something about that. And they came up with this horrific plan to confiscate all food. And then people began to die. People began to die. Some were deported. All eastern Ukraine was depopulated. Empty villages, empty little towns. So Stalin repopulated it with Russians, with these Russian speakers, so-called, what Putin is saying, that he is there to protect Russian speakers. Well, the whole argument of protecting speakers is absurd. I mean, we just had 15th of April, and I was struggling with my taxes. What if I would appeal to Her Majesty that we are English speakers oppressed, and just come and save us? Yes, this is this ridiculous argument that we need to protect people who speak the same language, or they will come to Kenosha to protect me. That's how these Russian speakers got there. I don't blame that people, because they're also pawns. They were also slaves. They were just reshuffled from one part of the concentration camp to another, many against their will. But that's what happened, and it's a very, very difficult kind of thing. Is that true that they support Mr. Putin? If you will go to Eastern Europe, you will see that Russian propaganda is extremely strong. For example, in most of these post-Soviet countries, you can only watch Russian television. Russian television is worse than television under Soviets. And the Soviet television was so stupid that it was impossible to believe it. In Russian television, they would mix it together with the American rock bands and on and on like that. What's his name? Is Steve Seagal, maybe. He is a permanent fixture right now in Russia. He declared himself that he is unknown brother of Mr. Putin, and on like that. So it's pretty entertaining, and you mix it with lies, and you put more lies, and Lenin used to say that, you put lies, you pile lies, you put more lies on old lies, something would stick. And if you watch only lies, then that would be the case. Definitely in Russia today, many people still have access to World Wide Web, and they can research and they can do something, but that would be people who, well, the assessments are like maybe 1/4 of people who do that. 2/3 are just struggling, earning money, feeding families, and listening and watching, having their vodka, watching the stupid television, and getting completely stoned in ideological sense. Mm-hmm. They did open that up, yes. The question was about archives, that the Soviet archives, when they would be open. When there will be no Putin, definitely, because today KGB became the political force. It runs the country. It's not the parties or whatnot. Putin created his own party called United Russia. Mr. Gryzlov, he was a chairman of the party. He was recently on this Russian TV, and he was asked, what's the program of the party? And he said, whatever is on his mind, openly. He said, whatever is on his mind is our program. Because we believe that at last, Russia got a great leader. Where all the time we're like kitten in the dark, and we were kind of wherever we were taken for a ride by all kind of crooks. Now we are lucky, we got him. What Mr. Zhirinovsky, leader of opposition, how he opposes Mr. Putin? He recently made a statement that we should crown him because the genes of this kind should not be wasted. No, like that. So if you listen to this all the time, then it's impossible even to kind of to believe what is there. It's pretty sad. Now, so what can we do? I think about that. I think that we should. The thing number one is to call evil evil. That's very important, I think, to provide at least kind of moral support to people who are suffering and because Mr. Putin will not stop. He will not stop. I think the next victim, I think, will be Kazakhstan, because they have 44% of population are Russian speakers, and they live in very compact places in northern and western Kazakhstan, so they kind of and Mr. Putin right now is talking about human rights violations in Kazakhstan, so preparing the soil. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Right, any other questions?
How would you describe the relationship or lack of relationship between Moscow and Beijing?
Oh, there's a lot of relationship there. A lot of relation. They all the time had kind of very love-hate relationships. If you will look at what, I think that if more countries would become like socialist or whatever, because what Mr. Putin did, I didn't mention that, and it's very important, that there are two types of socialism. One is called German type. That's the Austrian economists like Hayek and Mises writing a lot about this. One is called Soviet or Russian type. That means everything is nationalized by the state. That everything belongs to the government, including people. And another one is German type, National Socialist type. Under National Socialist type, you have property rights are declared, but they're phony. It's the same thing if you have a title on wetlands in the United States. I mean, you have a title, but you cannot even visit, right? Or camp there or whatever. So that's exactly what happened, I think, in Russia, that they moved from Soviet type of socialism to National Socialist type. So when Mr. Putin all the time blaming Ukrainians for being fascist, if he really wants to see a fascist, he just should look in the mirror, because Russian regime is extremely nationalist and socialist. In 1990s, if you remember, we had this oligarchs, the rich people, whatever. Everybody hated them. Now no oligarchs no more. He introduced his own monopoly on power, on everything, on crime. So he is with China. What they do with China is that they're trying to create all kind of fronts against the United States and against the West. There is something called Beijing Organization. Shanghai Beijing Cooperation Organization. 7 countries there, including Iran, our friend Iran, is there as well. And this organization is having both economic and military cooperation. There are Russian and Chinese military games in the Far East. They have, Russians are providing Chinese army with a lot of equipment, I mean, selling them a lot of equipment. So today, I think they have pretty good relationship. However, Mr. Putin, being a racist, he was talking a lot about the yellow threat, like Wilhelm II, the German chancellor, German emperor was all time talking about yellow threat. So he is repeating that kind of racist stuff from time to time. And they have about 5 million illegal immigrants from China in eastern part of Siberia, who are extremely industrious people, very entrepreneurial. They are creating real wonders, economic wonders in pockets of that area. So they have, because their interests are the same, objectively. Then Russians discovered a lot of oil and gas also in the eastern Siberia. So it will be easy to put a pipelines to China. So that's the Chinese economy is definitely, I mean, it dwarfed Russian economy is what 1/16 of Chinese economy. So just to put it in perspective, yeah. So that's Russia is, if you will look, that's why it's dangerous, because it's very, very vulnerable. 85% of Russian budget would be from oil and other natural resources. Just oil itself, 52%. 85% oil, natural gas, gold, diamonds. Russia is very rich in all natural resources. That's why in economics we even have a term, curse of natural resources. It means that countries which are endowed with a lot of resources usually are the least free ones. And that's a very interesting answer. Why would that be? Because our government, even if it doesn't like us, and I think it doesn't, but our government is still interested in us, because we are paying their wages, we're paying their salaries, we're paying their whatever health coverage. While in Russia, people are expendable because it's all government-owned natural resources. So in our case, it would be insane for us to kill geese laying golden eggs. In Russian case, you can eat eggs and geese and still get eggs from nature. So this is that's why, for example, if you will look at places like Rwanda or like Sierra Leone or Liberia, you probably watched the video called the blood diamonds. Blood diamonds. You can see these diamonds were a real curse for these people. Why this curse of natural resources does not happen here? Because our natural resources are privately owned. They are not just used by government to feed itself. Yeah. Lenin in 1922, he wrote from the same archives in Library of Congress. He wrote to Trotsky. He said, "Dear Leo, if our revolution would win in Belgium, we would be done away in a week. Here we have 11 time zones, meaning to loot." And that's what exactly they did. So they were parasiting and still parasiting on this natural resource. And now with the price of oil going down by 54%, with everything else, then with not many people know that United States right now is #1 in the world in production of oil, #1 in the world in production of natural gas. That all happened during the last 2014, during the last year. So we are much less dependent on this. We still have, I would say, energy policy which is playing in the hands of Mr. Putin. We are against Keystone, against drilling, against this and that. But from another hand, because of oversupply right now of the oil on the international markets, you can see that Mr. Putin is becoming more vulnerable. And as more vulnerable, he will become even more unpredictable. Because now it is worse than in Soviet Union. They had Politburo, collective leadership, so-called. This collective leadership, they were kind of like spiders in a jar. There was a lot of infighting, a lot of whatever. And even that was better because there was some competition. Now we have a one-man show, and it's impossible to predict what His Majesty would decide. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to know what kind of reception you get in Washington when you tell them what's happening. Anybody listen to you?
Well, they listen, yes. I mean, they listen pretty well. That's why they ask me back. I mean, that's because, can you imagine, I mean, I am doing it for 25 years, so they need to bring a Russian expert from Kenosha, Wisconsin. With all my due respect to Carthage College, it looks like they looked after under every stone, every rock, and found the greatest expert in Carthage College. I mean, and they have Georgetown University next door, and they have George Washington University. And no. Yes, because I'm getting the best evaluations. That's the only thing which keeps me going. Because they listen. I mean, they listen. They like the message. I think it's mostly senior officers, and I would say that.
Are you making a difference?
Hopefully. I mean, what else can I do?
Well, I just wonder.
Yeah.
People that are so
hope.
It seems like we don't learn anything from history. We don't know, appeasement with Germany. Britain did it. We're doing the same thing in the Ukraine. And here you're talking to them. When is somebody going to listen?
I completely agree with John that there is a very cheerful Russian saying even about this, that the only lesson of history is that it does not teach us anything. And that's exactly, I think, what is happening, because we are repeating the same thing again and again and again. These people, they are not, I don't think they're decision makers. They're generals, wherever, they're officers, maybe they will write something somewhere or do whatever they. No, it's my. Then also these seminars are kind of, for example, we have on the seminars, just to balance me probably, we have people like Ralph Nader. What they can learn from Ralph Nader? I don't know. It's just, sometimes entertaining because we would share the round table. So this is, I think it's just continuous education kind of thing for them, in a sense that they need to do this, just to check something somewhere. Oh, sorry. Just after.
Okay, I have two questions for you.
Okay.
First question.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
What do you think is the future of BRICS?
Uh-huh.
And second question is, you touched the war between Russia and Georgia.
Uh-huh.
Now, do you happen to know how many Russian soldiers or peacekeepers were killed when Georgia attacked South Ossetia? Because they were stationed between South Ossetia and Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
How many Russians were killed by Georgians?
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Yes, I'm so sorry because he was raising his hand before. Yeah. Well, how many people were killed in? Yes.
No. How many Russian peacekeepers?
Yeah.
When Georgian troops came, they killed all Russian peacekeepers who were stationed there between South Ossetia and Georgia. How many Russians were killed by Georgians?
I think that you kind of mixing two countries, which is not big deal. South, yes. There was no Russian peacekeepers in South Ossetia. There were Russian peacekeepers in Abkhazia, in another place. And I don't know how many of them were killed or whatnot. But South Ossetia, that's an enclave. It's not Russian enclave. Also, Ossetians are different people.
They're Muslims.
Yes, they're Muslims, and Georgians are Christians. And they had kind of problems and whatnot. And I would say that if that would be kind of then everybody who wants to secede, I think they should secede. And instead of having this burning kind of bad blood in these cases. With South Ossetia, what happened, in South Ossetia, the FSB or KGB implanted a lot of Russian, like they did in eastern Ukraine, a lot of FSB officers who were stirring unrest, and moreover, they were distributing Russian passports. You could go in South Ossetia, you could go to the people knew whom to go. They go to a basement, they have a Polaroid, they have a blank passports, they will issue you Russian passports, and then you already are defending Russians or protecting Russians. So that's the Russians moved in, I think, without any justification, because I would say that with Crimea or with South Ossetia or with Abkhazia or with Tridnestr Republic, these are all awful kind of rogue countries created by Mr. Putin all over the former Soviet Union. They are still, I mean, you can resolve it in accordance with international law. Then you need to come to an agreement on what to do. What Russians are doing, they would stir unrest, they would get this uprising. How many Georgians were killed? About 6,000 in South Ossetia. They were mass murders and then the regular Russian army moved in. That was it. There were no peacekeepers in South Ossetia. There were peacekeepers in Abkhazia, which dates back to 1996. In 1996, I don't think they were. That was just awful. Can you imagine? United Nations sent a fox to guard chicken to South Ossetia because they were United Nations peacekeepers. At that time, there was another kind of. And then also, if you have if you have, right now we have in the sentencing phase of Tsarnaev's, terrorist Tsarnaev in Boston. How come that we have these Chechen terrorists in Boston? Why Tsarnaev? Amazingly enough, it's our government we should thank for, because we did a lot of bad things with Chechnya in the 1990s. Then we had some kind of, I don't know, hangover or remorse or whatever, and the Department of State instituted a special program for refugees from Chechnya. So we, at your money, they would go there, pick up people, bring them to the United States. The people who hate us with great passion. Not only Chechens, you know, what happened recently in Minneapolis, that six residents of Minnesota, Somalis, that they kind of working for ISIS and whatnot. And then I think this is a pretty bad service for those who were killed and the families of these people. So that's, I think that our foreign policy is pretty strange. Yeah. And what was the other question? The Greeks.
No, the BRICS.
BRICS. Okay.
What do you think their future will be? Because they have started the bank with $100 billion already.
That's right. BRICS means it's new international organization, means Brazil, Russia, India, and China. So BRIC. In South Africa, right. And so they, what's in common between them? Not much. That's the whole idea is that China right now has become a kind of a powerhouse in the world economy, and they want to have as many kind of allies as they possibly can. And the whole idea of BRIC is to have a kind of a counterbalance to the West, to us and to Europe and to China and to Japan. And so they have meetings. They just created this development bank with $100 billion, of which Russia provided, I think, like about 18 only, and China is providing half. And so these are well, $100 billion is not a big deal, as you know, right? That's I mean, we live in a rich country with a national debt of about 20 trillion, so 100 billion would be just a drop in the bucket. But that's what it is. Definitely, South Africa and Brazil today are not doing well at all because they just have pretty bad economic policies. They have these kleptocrats in power and whatnot. Look how rotten is South African government today. Mr. Zuma with 8 wives. I was watching myself the documentary about his. He was accused of rape. He had like 26 different court cases. He was accused of rape, and he, the president of the country, he's saying, and the attorney is saying, look, I mean, that the victim, she was HIV positive. And he said, before that, he was saying, no, we didn't have any relation. He was like Bill Clinton. I didn't have any sex with this woman. And then he said, I took a shower in the morning. Can you imagine? President of the country, he said, when he was told that his victim was HIV positive, he said, no, I took a shower. So like a shower, you can wash HIV or whatever. So these are kind of a quality of people. In India, definitely, they have, it's a powerhouse in the making. Their president, their prime minister is a very free market kind of person. I think that he's putting very sound politics sound economics and politics in place. And the country with this much of people, they would surpass China, I think, in a couple of years in population-wise. Oh yes, and the last question, right?
Does Snowden play any role in this at all?
Snowden, yeah, because I don't know, to tell the truth, because it's difficult to say. Well, most of my audiences, for example, most of the senior military and intelligence people, they think he was drafted a long time before and he was doing what he was, whatever, because they would think it's laughable that a person would from Hong Kong go to Russia, like because he got a ticket like that he would kind of randomly travel through Russia. I don't know for sure. I think that I think that I'm kind of thankful to him that he opened our eyes on something. That's definitely is very good. From another hand, that was a very entertaining interview of Mr. Snowden by John Oliver. And if you haven't watched it, you can watch it on YouTube. It's both entertaining and I think telling a lot. That Mr. Snowden showed up from the side of the building of the KGB in Moscow, and it was all monitored just across. So I really totally don't know what is happening. The day before yesterday, Mr. Ilves, the Prime Minister of Estonia, he made a point about Mr. Snowden. That in Estonia is a fantastic country, former Soviet colony as well. They call it E-Estonia, little e, and then Estonia. And they have e-government program, and Russians all the time trying to hack in. And Estonia is, and he believes that Mr. Snowden was kind of monitored by Russia already way before, that maybe he did something wrong or whatever, that they had something on him, his point was. I don't know how. He made an interesting point. His point is that now hackers are not only just intruding your privacy. And he made a very interesting point that I don't care if people know my blood type. What I'm afraid of, that hackers would come and change it. So that's what right now the hacking coming from Russia is doing with this Estonian bank system and everything else. Well, I think I maybe depressed you enough. All right, well, thank you so much for coming. And I also hope to see you on this beautiful places. Let's travel together.